idea that Trump is anti-war at this point is literally the most laughable thing I've ever heard about Donald Trump in particular. I think even his supporters will agree. Ain't nothing anti-war about that guy. Nuclear talks between the United States and Iran were collapsing as of this morning, and that was according to Axios reporter and Israeli insider Barak Ravid. Now, yesterday we had shared that the talks were supposed to take place this Friday, meaning in just a few days, in Istanbul, Turkey. Now, they were supposed to include Iran's foreign minister, along with Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The inclusion of Kushner in particular is cause for concern, but I want to be very clear that I also don't have much faith in Witkoff either. Now, the tentative plans were very shaky, especially considering the fact that yesterday the Iranians said, maybe we don't want to meet in Istanbul, Turkey. We'd rather meet in Oman. And it was unclear whether or not the US was willing to accept those conditions. The Iranians said on Tuesday, so that was just yesterday, that they wanted to move the talks to Oman and hold them in a bilateral format in order to ensure that they focused only on nuclear issues and not other matters like missiles that are priorities for the US and countries in the region. It's not really a priority for countries in the region. It's a priority for Israel. And since it's a priority for Israel, it is made a priority for the United States, which I don't think it should be. I think that trying to control whether or not Iran has missiles is ridiculous. Israel moving the goalposts on this is just so brazen because they don't want peace. They want to implement undoable, right? And when I say undoable, I'm not saying impossible, but they want to implement certain conditions that they know the Iranians are not going to agree to. And so as a result, the peace negotiations will fall apart, and that will pave the way for the United States to potentially go to war with Iran. That's what the Israelis want. Now, the United States did actually reject the suggestion initially, with an anonymous senior US official telling Axios, quote, "We told the Iranians it is this or nothing, and they said, okay, then nothing." So as of this morning, the talks were off. They weren't gonna happen. But then, out of nowhere, you have several Arab and Muslim countries coming together and lobbying the Trump administration real hard to continue attempting to pursue peace as opposed to war. So let's get to the details on that. So one US official is quoted as saying, quote, "They," meaning Arab and Muslim countries in the region, "they asked us to keep the meeting and listen to what the Iranians have to say. We have told the Arabs that we will do the meeting if they insist, but we are very skeptical." We're very skeptical. What are you skeptical about? What are you skeptical about? Are you skeptical of Iran's intentions? Because Iran's been very clear, and in the past have actually conceded and agreed to peace agreements in which they would not develop any nuclear weapons. They would not enrich uranium past the amount that's necessary for energy purposes. There were checks implemented in the so-called Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. You had foreign countries able to go into Iran in order to oversee what's going on there, to make sure that they're not developing nuclear weapons. But Donald Trump came in on the orders of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis. And in 2018, he ripped the JCPOA up, which paved the way for Iran to enrich uranium and develop nuclear weapons. But here's the thing, I don't think Israel is actually concerned about Iran developing nuclear weapons. What Israel's concerned about is the fact that there is one country at this point in that region that serves as a check on Israel and its efforts, its real objectives in expanding its empire. And they don't like that. They don't want any challenges. And so they're gonna get the United States, much as they've done in the past, to essentially do their dirty work for them. And if Donald Trump loved this country, prioritized our people, he would just reject that fully. But it seems very easy to manipulate him, and the Israelis are real good at manipulation. So with that in mind, it also doesn't help that Israel is in fact involved in some of the internal backdoor discussions that are taking place right now. So for instance, on Tuesday, Witkoff, meaning Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, landed in Israel for talks about Iran with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the head of Israel's Mossad spy agency, David Barnea, as well as other security chiefs, according to 2 Israeli officials. Well, I mean, look, I know that every single political operative and politician in this country, with the exception of maybe Zoran Mamdani, who's a local politician. Everyone else, and Thomas Massie to be fair, and Ro Khanna to be fair, other than that, they all get dog walked by Israel. So meeting with Israel is just meeting with them so you can jot down their orders. So I don't really have much hope when we're taking their advice or taking their orders on this matter. On top of that, a succession of Israeli spies and generals, including Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff, General Eyal Zamir, have visited DC in recent days. Zamir briefed Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane on Israel's offensive and defensive plans in the event of war with Iran. Now, in a recent interview with CNN, Iran's foreign minister made sure to emphasize that the Iranians learned quite a bit from the 12-day war that took place over this past summer. They learned what their vulnerabilities are, they learned what their weaknesses happen to be, and as a result, they have strengthened their offensive capabilities. That's something to keep in mind as we barrel closer to a hot war with Iran, which I genuinely think we should avoid at all costs. Now, furthermore, a US official who was present for that meeting told Axios that it's really the Israelis who want to strike. The president is just not there. Listen, the president is there, okay? The president, first of all, let me just say this. Donald Trump is not driven by any principles or ideology. Donald Trump just dopily exists and he's like a bull in the china shop that's easily manipulated based on money, based on the last person who was in the room speaking with him. So he can be moved on this issue. The idea that Trump is anti-war at this point is literally the most laughable thing I've ever heard about Donald Trump in particular. I think even his supporters will agree, ain't nothing anti-war about that guy, okay? So, and it doesn't, look, it doesn't mean the usual suspects aren't working overtime, to pressure Trump to advance toward a war on Iran anyway. So I'm gonna start off with this interview, this exchange that happened with NBC News reporter. I thought this was fascinating because if you listen to the framing of the question, you can get a sense for why corporate media is considered pro-war media. Take a look.
As you know, they're negotiating with us.
I know they are, but the protesters have said, where are the Americans? You promised them we would have their back. Do we still have their back?
Well, we've had their back, and look, that country's a mess right now because of us. We went in, we wiped out their nuclear.
What's the deal about? I mean, if there's no more, are they trying to restart the nuclear program?
Well, I heard that they are, and if they do, and I let them know, if they do, we're going to send them right back and do their job again.
So your understanding is they tried to restart it, and that's why you're threatening force?
They tried to go back to the site. They weren't even able to get near it. There was total obliteration. But they were thinking about starting a new site in a different part of the country. We found out about it. I said, you do that, we're going to do very bad things to you.
If Trump genuinely believes that the US obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities, then Iran is not a threat to Israel, which by the way, I don't even care about that. That's not my priority. Just as it's not my priority to be concerned about the national security of any other foreign country. Okay, so if you care for some reason about the safety and security of Israel, well, you shouldn't worry about nuclear weapons because Iran doesn't have them. Okay, in the case of the United States, it matters even more whether or not Iran is a threat to our national security. And Iran is not a threat to our national security. If we want to preserve American lives, the best way to do it is to avoid fighting a war with Iran on behalf of Israel. Let's be very clear about that. Now, on top of that, let's check in with Mark Levin. I read this post to you all yesterday, but in case you missed it, he had said, how about this time we listen to Bibi, meaning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, rather than dictate to him? I'm sorry, can you explain to me why the American people or the American government needs to have a foreign leader dictate our foreign policy? Why would we need to listen to him? He continues, though. Of course, he's right. The Iranian Nazi Islamist mass murdering genocidal regime cannot be trusted to keep its word. Basic stuff. Every accusation is an admission. This is a great example of that. You want to talk about genocide? You want to talk about genocide. Okay. Now, with that in mind, I just want to remind everybody that our government actually has taken demands and commands from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the past. And I just want to remind you all of how that worked out for us. Let's take a look.
If you take away the Soviet Union and its chief proxy, the PLO, international terrorism would collapse.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out?
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The answer is categorically yes. The two nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran. A third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. Libya is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb capability. We'll stand together to stop Iran's march of conquest, subjugation, and terror. I know that no matter on which side of the aisle you sit, you stand with Israel.
I personally do not. And part of the reason why is because of what Israel has carried out in Gaza, continues to carry out in Gaza and the West Bank. And I'm sorry, I can't co-sign onto a foreign government that has carried out the mass slaughter of innocents and has done so in this effort to expand empire, to steal land. But with that in mind, he mentioned a lot of different countries there. He mentioned Iraq, which we did a preemptive invasion of in 2003 and didn't work out so well for us, did it? Thousands of our men and women died as a result of that preemptive, ridiculous war. Libya, after overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi, something Israel desperately wanted. What's the condition of Libya right now? Oh yeah, that's right. They're engaging in slave trade. So destabilize that country. What about Syria? At the behest of the Israelis, the United States, under Obama, by the way, began arming Al-Qaeda and offshoots of Al-Qaeda. And now we have a former Al-Qaeda terrorist, allegedly, serving as the leader of Syria. How does that benefit the United States in any way, shape, or form? Can someone explain that to me? So yeah, Mark, unfortunately, our bonehead politicians who are easily corrupted did take Bibi's advice. They did allow themselves to be dictated by a foreign leader. And they did so at the detriment of the American people and the US economy. Finally, I turn to the Wall Street Journal, because if ever you want to look for pressure toward any administration to go to war, you will find it among the writers over at the Wall Street Journal editorial board. In fact, they just published a piece titled, "The Deal in Iran is Regime Change." So like when they tell you who they are, just believe them, okay? Because the whole point of this is that, yeah, whatever. Look, let's stop the charade here, okay? Let's just stop. This has nothing to do with weapons. This has nothing to do with nuclear weapons, missiles. This has nothing to do with those protesters. We don't really care about those protesters at all. Just like we don't care about, Middle Eastern women and how they're treated by their government. Our country doesn't care. Look at how our country treats our protesters. What the Wall Street Journal is trying to say here is, no, we want regime change. Okay, like let's stop pretending. And I appreciate the fact that they don't want to pretend, okay? Because it's insulting to our intelligence when these morons act as though we're gonna believe that they care about protesters in a foreign country. Anyway, here's what the Wall Street Journal writes. Again, this is the editorial board. Trump is sending mixed signals, but says he is open to a deal. Iran says talks are set for later this week. In Turkey, that's changed to Oman, by the way. Though the crucial question is, what is left to talk about? Let's just bomb. Why are we gonna have a conversation? So before June's 12-day war, Trump gave Ayatollah Ali Khamenei 2 months to dismantle his nuclear program. The supreme leader refused, so Jerusalem and Washington did it for them, burying Iran's nuclear material deep underground. I'd like to issue another correction. Jerusalem did not carry out strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. The United States did, our soldiers did. I continue. Why would the US get dragged into a war with Iran if, again, the US clearly has dismantled Iran's nuclear program? Well, concessions now on the enrichment of nuclear fuel, if the regime is even willing to make them, are far less meaningful. Tehran presumably would demand sanctions relief in return, but that would help the regime shore up its power with more money to fund repression. You want to know what's repressing the people of Iran right now? The artificially destroyed Iranian economy, thanks to our sanctions. So that's another point to bring up when anyone in our government or any Zionist who's trying to manipulate you into supporting our country going to war with a foreign country on behalf of Israel. You should mention, the sanctions have really hurt ordinary people in Iran. So if you're worried about their livelihoods, if you're worried about their quality of life, why would you defend sanctioning Iran as aggressively as the United States has? They don't actually care about the people there. But anyway, what message would that send to the Iranian people after so many risked their lives to protest? As Iranians know, this regime is willing to impoverish and endanger its own country to pursue a death to America and death to Israel foreign policy. It is a regime bent on spreading revolution, not on living peacefully with its neighbors. When has Iran spread its or attempted to spread its revolution outside of its borders? But seriously, like someone answer that question. Iran would like to be left alone. And I think that on multiple occasions, it's been very clear that Iran doesn't want to go to war. They are willing to go out of their way to engage in peace negotiations. But to the Wall Street Journal's point about we can't take Iran's word for anything. Can Iran take the US's word for anything? I mean, the US pulled out of the JCPOA. Trump pretended like he was going to engage in good faith negotiations immediately before he proceeded to bomb Iran's nuclear sites. How about we take a good hard look at our own conduct? And when I say our, of course, I mean the US government. And again, the country is impoverished because we have made it so. Our government has implemented just brutal sanctions that hurt Iran's economy. And finally, I'll just read one more excerpt. They say that there is a better way for President Trump. Help the protesters topple the Ayatollah and his enforcers. If Iran's revolutionary regime falls, the whole region gets better. China and Russia lose the third spoke in their axis of US adversaries. I remember the axis of evil arguments that were made by David Frum, George W. Bush's speechwriter, during the Bush administration, of course. And it's just amazing that they just recycle the same BS and think that the majority of Americans are gonna buy it. They're gonna totally support going to war with a country that doesn't actually pose a threat to the US at all. But to do so, again, on behalf of Israel, I think we've had enough.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.